Nile Ranger was once England's most promising wonder kid, but his career washed down the drain when he became one of England's most reoffending criminals. At the age of 19, he was a star for one of the Premier League's biggest teams, but years later, he found himself playing in the 8th tier of football. Let's dive into the life and career of Nile Ranger, who was born in West London on the 11th of April 1991. His earliest memory is getting kicked out of primary school for abusing teachers and fighting students. Nile's mother felt she had no control over her menaced son and would take him to church to teach him good manners, and his only role models were friends, as his dad didn't really care for Nile. From birth, Nile always played with a football, and he attended local clubs before being picked up by Crystal Palace at 10 years old, playing in the same team as Wilfred Zaha and John Bostock. Despite the tough competition around him, Nile worked his way to be the best in the academy. However, his behaviour at his new secondary school got so terrible that they constantly sent letters to the Palace Academy, and he was released after 2 years. That's because in year 7, Nile would steal phones from students in his school before heading to Finsbury Park to sell them off with a newfound gang. This new income, as well as his mum giving him £2 a day for pocket money, was actually spent at the bookies, where he'd go with his cousin to play slot machines, an addiction that will haunt him later. At 13, Nile's mum Karen was called into school to sit with him in class so he wouldn't mess around. It didn't work. In year 9, he was kicked out of school after burning a classmate with a Bunsen burner. No school would take him, a prelude for his later life, so Nile enrolled in a special school for kids with behaviour problems, which he recalls felt like a mini prison. Nile was surrounded by bad boys whom he became close with outside of school. Knowing he had no future in the real world, football was the only thing Nile could make a living from, and he returned to the game joining a semi-professional team called Broadwater Farm, where there was a decent standard of football and somewhere to channel his pent-up energy. At least that's what should have happened. Nile was still mixing with the wrong crowd, and one night was among a gang of lads who robbed a nearby high school. This would be the first of many times Nile would be arrested. He was bailed for 7 months and put on curfew, but that still didn't stop him. He constantly flouted the curfew to rob more houses, to which his mum grasped onto the police and was soon brought back to prison for further robberies. They fitted Nile with an electronic tag, but he found a way of slipping it off using some fairy liquid to loot more homes. Back in football, Nile joined a new semi-pro club, Romford FC, and also enrolled at a top London football academy run by Danny Chitu. The hours in between football were spent either robbing houses, gambling, or taking substances, and it was inevitable that those worlds would collide. After one training session at his new academy, Nile stole every mobile phone in the dressing room and was caught red-handed by Danny, leading to him being banned. That should have been the moment Nile turned his life around, but instead he went on a rampage with his gang of 6, all armed with knives. Once, they all hopped on a bus and started robbing phones by any means necessary. After looting the top deck, they jump off, board another bus, and carry out the same attack. A 15-year-old Nile ripped a phone out of an elderly lady's hands before being caught and arrested by police. Nile was charged with armed robbery and was bailed again, pending a date for a trial. This time, it was serious. While waiting for a letter to arrive in the post, he continued to break the curfew. On one successful afternoon, he came away with a laptop worth £700, but was then caught in possession of a stolen iPod and arrested yet again. Nile was 15 and his mum was considering chucking him out as police were constantly around his house. He begged her for another chance, so in 2007 he was sent to a college football academy with links with professional clubs throughout England. Nile's college played a pre-season match against the Southampton academy, and he came off the bench, scored twice and won them the game. Weeks later, Nile's academy coach got a call from Saints offering Nile a trial. He trained with the youth team and was offered a 2-year scholarship within days. Southampton was seen as a fresh start away from the naughty area. They paid £95 a week and put him up in a lodge with the rest of the academy players, where he became good mates with Bradley White-Phillips, Nathan Dyer and David McGoldrick. Nile was the top scorer in the entire academy, bearing in mind Southampton's academy was one of the best in the entire UK. In the evening, Nile grew a habit of sneaking out to nightclubs. Eventually, the landlady grew wise to his disappearing act and told the club, which led to a fine. Southampton didn't know anything about Nile's troubled past, and the academy director got an unpleasant surprise when the club received a letter from the Crown Prosecution Service ordering him to stand trial over armed robbery. In court, the club told the judge about his talent and how he'd begun to mend his ways, but the damage was done. Nile was sentenced to 4 months in a young offender institution. He was locked up for 23 hours a day, although tried to stay sharp by playing for the prison football team. After just 2 months of his sentence, Nile was released and so went back to Southampton, where the club moved him into his own flat with his mum so she could keep an eye on him. Nile admits he received special treatment in this situation, as the Saints were keen for Nile to turn pro due to his insane potential, something which will become more and more clear throughout the video. In the academy, he started scoring goals again, but hit the self-destruct button when he was caught on CCTV stealing the first team's boots and training kit, as well as the kitman's box of roses. The reason for this theft was so Nile could give this kit to his friends up in London, probably to impress them. Then Saints boss Nigel Pearson, a man you don't want to get on the wrong side of, was furious with Nile and showed him the door. He and his mum moved back up to London, where his friends encouraged him to get back on the robberies. At the same time, Nile's phone was constantly ringing from clubs who weren't bothered about his disciplinary issues and just wanted to sign a talented young star. He recruited an agent who got him a trial at Swindon, where he enjoyed being back in the academy environment. He recalls other players would steal his stuff, but that didn't faze him, as in a friendly he scored an overhead kick and they offered him £300 a week. But before he could accept, his agent called and asked him to meet at a nearby Burger King. There was a 2-year contract on the table from Newcastle, worth 3 times as much, plus a £20,000 signing on fee. On paper, it was a no-brainer, but he was in 2 minds about living so far away from home. It took a lot of persuasion from executive director Dennis Wise to get him to sign. In Newcastle, Nile stayed in digs with 2 other youth team players and had a very strict landlord who insisted that they all ate at the dinner table every night and went to bed at certain times. The routine helped him, and he soon started scoring goals for the under-18s and reserve team, watched by Kevin Keegan and some of the senior lads. Keegan was so excited to have a player of this potential, football's next star, and so he called Nile up to train with the senior team. The first time Nile ever met him, he didn't know what to say and ended up blurting out, "Alright Keegan?" He laughed but sinisterly warned Nile that he was to never call him that again. Just Gaffer. Months earlier, he'd been in prison. Now, he was getting changed next to Alan Shearer and Michael Owen. It was mad. Nile kept his head down and Adam Thompson spoke to him and said, "Pack your stuff. You're involved in the first team squad and travelling with them to Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium, the team he grew up supporting." Newcastle travelled down on a private jet, and he remembers Owen and Nicky Butt placing £500 bets on whose bag would appear out of the luggage carousel first. It was a different world. Nile learned that again when he appeared late to Newcastle's morning walk, to which Keegan gave him hairdryer treatment in front of the rest of the boys. Nevertheless, Nile arrived at the Emirates with stars in his eyes and was told he was on the bench. 67 minutes into Newcastle's 3-0 loss, Keegan asked Nile to be ready and warm up. He didn't play though. Weeks later, Keegan resigned with Joe Kinnear taking charge. Kinnear never never really had a relationship with Nile, so he was dropped, but scored 15 goals for the under-18s and 7 for the reserves. His career reached a new high in March 2009 after being called up to the England under-19 team. At the Three Lions, Nile made his debut against Czech Republic, scored against Bosnia and Herzegovina, and played in the Euro finals against Ukraine. These achievements were hollow, as Nile's time with England was remembered by him proudly exclaiming he punched teammate Andros Townsend in the head after an argument. Nile knew he was in the wrong and also claims it's one of the only times he has said sorry. The incident was put behind them and Nile returned to Newcastle with new interim boss Alan Shearer rewarding the lad with a new 3.5-year deal. I must be clear, that wasn't for punching Townsend, of course. This shiny new contract was worth £10,000 a week and included a string of bonuses if he scored goals and made a certain number of appearances. Nile, of course, went shopping for flashy trainers and expensive tracksuits. He was still only 18 and hadn't made his Newcastle first team debut. That changed in August 2009 though, when he came on in the 89th minute of a championship game at West Bromwich Albion. It took him until December to score his first goal away at Coventry, but he added a second in a January victory over Crystal Palace at St James's Park. Nile made 30 appearances that season as Newcastle won promotion back to the Premier League at the first time of asking. People really started to notice Nile as a wonder kid, top talent. It's not common to see a player really hit the ground running at that age. He felt like the Wolf of Wall Street as he'd leave the pitch to standing ovations and spent all his money on nights out, which his mum told him to save for a mortgage, as he was renting out a Gateshead flat. But that didn't paint the full picture. Off the pitch, he'd been in trouble with new manager Chris Hughton, who'd been appointed at the beginning of the 2009-10 season. Nile turned up late for training more than once after pressing snooze from staying up late the night before, and was also spending far too much free time in casinos. He gambled £30,000 in 2 months and borrowed £70,000 from Hatem Ben Arfa, Stephen Taylor and Fabrizio Collicini to pay off debts. The club found out and Mike Ashley had to ban him from every casino in Tyne and Wear. Ashley was trying to help, but Nile didn't listen and fought with security guards to be allowed access to the tables. He argued it's not a big deal if he lost because he was on a well-paid 5-year deal anyway. Club captain Collicini sat Nile down and warned him about the dangers of gambling. Mark Viduka was a positive influence too, often advising young players to save their money. Alan Smith was another good role model who drove a battered old car despite his big earnings. But a 19-year-old Nile thought he was too established to listen to anybody's advice. A £96,000 promotion bonus landed in his bank account, and so he spent a chunk of it on a brand new Range Rover, which he kitted out with his self-given nickname Power Ranger. It soon caught the gaffer's eye. Andy Carroll then got hold of the car keys at training and parked it right outside the player's entrance. The gaffer warned Nile to spend his money wisely and not let it go to his head, but it went in one ear and out the other. Nile was still doing his bit on the pitch and scored in a 4-3 League Cup win at Chelsea in September 2010. After the game, he was pulled aside by a club official who showed Nile a picture of him posing with a weapon, which the papers were going to print the next day. Nile's WhatsApp profile picture was him posing with a BB weapon, and someone had sent a screenshot to it showed them the pellets. The club fined him 2 weeks' wages, but that was pocket change compared to the new 5-year contract he was given just 3 months later. Newcastle had shown him loyalty, but Nile only repaid them with hassle. After another midweek night out, he drove home with his girlfriend in the passenger seat. Police stopped and breathalyzed Nile, who was over the limit, and locked in a cell until the morning, handed a £3,000 fine and banned from driving for a year. Alan Pardew succeeded Hughton, who had been sacked in December 2010 and grew tired of Nile's constant lateness as a result of him staying up all night playing FIFA online with his friends in London. Nile would also take long power naps after training every day, which ruined his sleep schedule. He was made to train with the academy kids as punishment. To make things even worse, he ended up in court after knocking out 2 men who had racially abused and then tried to attack him in the city centre. When officers tried to arrest Nile, he panicked and shoved them away, so got charged with assaulting the men and the policeman. Nile pleaded guilty, and thankfully CCTV footage supported his story, meaning he was given a 12-month conditional charge. After this, the FA fined him £6,000 for a separate incident in which Nile was making homophobic comments on social media, a platform where his go-to pose is the middle finger. What a role model. Also on social media, he came under fire for spelling his name out using £20 notes, which was seen as childish and a disrespectful flex to those who supported him. In October 2011, he went on a Halloween night out to Newcastle's Church Square dressed as a prisoner and argued with his ex, to which officers saw and arrested him because of his bad reputation of being intoxicated and disorderly. He then went from one prison outfit to the next. At training, he phoned up sick when he was actually hungover and would be forced to see the physios who smelt strong drink on him. Newcastle had washed their hands with Nile, sending him out on loan at Barnsley and then Sheffield Wednesday. He scored the goal that pretty much got the Owls promoted to the championship, and to celebrate he took his shirt off and his vest read, "I'm a changed man." If only the man had taken his own advice, eh? Nile was growing frustrated at Newcastle and lashed out at fans on Twitter after they started booing the club after a loss against Reading. And that's when True Geordie kicked off his career by posting a viral rant.
Right, a message to Nile Ranger here. A scumbag, right? This little bit of pond life decides to open his mouth and criticise the fans. Is he taking the piss here? I'll boo if I want to boo, sunshine. Got every right. This is my club. What have you done for this club? You've brought nothing but shame on me.
The Toon Army had rightly turned on him, even spray painting his garage, and after that, there was no way back. Fortunately for Nile, Alan Pardew granted him one last chance, and for once, Nile trained well and seemed to be back on a good path again. In the middle of a training session, Nile got a text message from his girlfriend saying she was leaving him and going back to London. Nile told the coaches a family issue had popped up in London, and he jumped in his Rover and chased her to London, where he smashed her door in and got arrested. Alan Pardew was fuming as he was lied to. After working hard to get back into the team and issue after issue cropping up, Nile decided to throw everything away and just go clubbing all the time to give him something to do. While out one night, Nile meets a girl at a club, they exchange numbers and he meets her another day. They get close, but she doesn't want to do anything as she already has a boyfriend, so Nile calls a cab. Everything that did happen was consensual. Nile said it's fine she doesn't want to engage with him, but the boyfriend doesn't need to know. After this encounter, Nile gets a knock on the door and police inform him he is arrested on suspicion of rape. He sat in custody, worried his career is finished, as he finds out it's all over the news. It truly was one thing after another with Nile, who was just about to get back into the team. Newcastle had shown enough loyalty, therefore they terminated his contract. Teams didn't want to come near him, especially after bad boy Nile picked up further intoxicated related troubles with the police, as well as refusing to apologise after crashing his Range Rover into a mother's written off parked car, which left the woman unable to take her sick baby daughter to the hospital. Nile had a criminal record longer than a shopping list and a charge looming over him. But after spending 5 months as a free agent with some interest from Premier League side Hull City, Nile signed a 12-month deal with League One Swindon Town on £4,000 a week. By this point, you'd think he'd have learned his lesson. You'd be very wrong, my friend. But before we get into that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it helps me out a lot. Nile scored 5 goals in his first 11 Swindon Town starts. He was regular and very good, but then he went missing. Nile didn't want to go in anymore as he was not in the mood for football. He was demotivated by the case, always waking up in a bad mood, then was dropped multiple times for turning up late to training or not turning up at all. When he was playing, opposition fans constantly heckled and chanted at Nile about his case, which himself and the club are of course embarrassed about. There was some good news when he was cleared of his charge in March 2014, but was arrested once again. Nile was intoxicated on on a night out in Liverpool and stood at a taxi rank waiting for a lift to his hotel. He jumped in the first car that came, but the taxi driver said, "I don't want you in my car, you're a Niall got out and smashed his car window. He got back to the hotel, got into his room, and officers were standing at his door. Just 1 month later, he was breaking entry into his own flat in Swindon when his female companion started arguing with him, trying to tell him the key was in his pocket. He hit the female friend in the face 3 times, blaming it on being blackout intoxicated. From the next day, he cut down on drinking completely. When someone went to fix a door, they found the CCTV footage, which was posted all over the internet, and Swindon Town said, "You're out. Good luck. You need to fix yourself." Niall felt low and depressed after being labelled a woman beater. Many people turned against him. Clubs wouldn't touch him. It was the first time he was properly disciplined and felt truly bad for his actions. Another month later, Niall was arrested for being intoxicated behind the wheel of a vehicle after falling asleep on the M4 motorway. Given his love for a bet and night out, joining Blackpool FC 3 months later wasn't a great decision, but Niall was desperate and they knew it. He was given a deal worth £150 a week and £3,000 a game if he played. He scored 2 goals in 14 championship appearances between August and November, but he wasn't happy with the wage. Niall was living in a hotel attached to the stadium, and his girlfriend left him after finding out he cheated on her in Blackpool. She drove back to London and he sped after her down the motorway for about 30 minutes before the police pulled him over. Niall went back up north, but after being left out of the squad for a home match against Birmingham in early December, he went AWOL for genuine family reasons. The club fined him every time he missed a training session, but he didn't care anymore. He only had a 12-month deal and figured they wouldn't extend it at the end of the season. Strangely, they then activated the 1-year option in his contract and told him to return for pre-season. Niall turned up 4 weeks late, by which point they'd already played 4 friendlies. He was made to train on his own, running up and down sand dunes on the beach, but couldn't get anywhere near Neil McDonald's first team despite issuing a public apology about his behaviour. Niall was eventually released from Blackpool in February 2016. Niall didn't play again until August, his first game since November 2014, after signing a 1-year deal with Southend. Niall's contract was worth peanuts, but after scoring 2 goals at Bury and another at Oldham, Phil Brown gave him a new 3-year contract for £3,000 a week. Brown probably regretted it when he was charged with online bank fraud a few weeks later. With another court case hanging over Niall, he ploughed on, scoring in 4 successive league games from mid-March to early April. But the joy was short-lived. In May, soon after the season had finished, he was sentenced to 8 months in jail after admitting conspiracy to defraud. He spent 10 weeks in Pentonville prison before being released for good behaviour, but had to wear a tag on his ankle for 5 weeks and was given a 7 PM curfew, which meant he couldn't play in any midweek evening games. In his first game after his tag was removed, he scored and celebrated by taking his boot off and shooting it as if it were a weapon, apparently being inspired by rapper Big Shaq. Meanwhile, Southend showed great loyalty towards Niall, and he played 21 times during the first half of 2017-18, but his contract was terminated in January after they finally ran out of patience with his attitude. Niall was lazy, unfit, and didn't turn up for training because he realised he was given special treatment being a special talent, which was unfair on the other players working their socks off for a place in the team. He says he is treated as the Osama bin Laden of football. Next, he trained with Oxford United for several weeks in 2018 but rejected a contract there because he felt the terms weren't good enough. Rochdale then offered him £1,000 a week after a brief trial, but he turned it down because they wanted him to live in an apartment with a new teammate and his girlfriend to make sure Niall didn't slip back into his old ways. In hindsight, they were both really stupid decisions. After leaving Southend, Niall moved back home with his mum and played five-a-side a couple of times a week just to stay fit. After having some proper time away from the game and look back on his career, Niall appeared on True Geordie's podcast to talk about his career and clear the air. He He worked to make himself a clean image, but this was tarnished in December 2020 when he was arrested and pleaded guilty to failing to provide a specimen of breath during a drink driving incident on Christmas Eve. The 30-year-old was kept in custody and later admitted to obstructing a police officer. The whole encounter was captured on CCTV, which showed Ranger being aggressive towards staff. The consequence was being banned from driving yet again and ordered to pay fines. Whilst this took place, Nile Ranger restarted his footy career in Sunday League at AC Barnet before joining Swindon United in the Northern Premier League Division 1 South East in the 8th tier, in which he was only able to play one game for them. In February 2021, Nile was due a happy ending as he married his girlfriend, had a son, and was offered a route back into professional football with Southend United's Phil Brown giving him that opportunity, which he jumped at. Having entered into a month-to-month contract, Nile made his debut, albeit lasting only 11 minutes. In that match against Salford City, he came on as a second-half substitute but suffered a groin injury, leading to his substitution. The severity of the injury was such that he was deemed unlikely to play for the rest of the season. In May 2021, following Southend's relegation to the National League, manager Phil Brown disclosed that the club had severed all ties with Nile due to his failure to attend physiotherapy sessions because the club didn't give him petrol money. A new path was laid by Nile as he followed his dream of starting a football academy to educate young players to not go down the same route he did, and in December 2021, Nile inked a deal with National League team Boreham Wood. He admitted he wanted to start again in football at non-league level and work his way up, like a Jamie Vardy. However, he also admits he doesn't have an athlete lifestyle, saying in Troy Deeney fashion, "I should be minimum championship right now. I shouldn't be having problems, but I didn't listen. If I added nutrition to my game and behaviour, I'm Haaland, but I didn't want to listen. I thought I knew it all." The duration of his new Boreham Wood contract was not disclosed by the club, and he played less than a total of 10 minutes for the side, appearing for them during their historic FA Cup run. Nile's last professional football appearance was 1 minute long in the FA Cup 5th round versus Everton at Goodison Park. In the match before, he played 1 minute in Boreham Wood's win versus Bournemouth, and since then, Nile has never found a club. Maybe due to the fact he admits even today at 32 years old, he has troubles waking up on time, which his wife gets onto him constantly. In 2023, Nile hit the headlines again when he angered fans by trying to sell tickets for the Carabao Cup final between Newcastle United and Manchester United at inflated prices to make a bit of profit. When Nile officially retires from football, he will be allowed access to a savings account that he has always been paying into, which his mum won't let him touch yet as he can't be trusted with large amounts of money. Today, not much is known about Nile's life and what he's up to. However, his social media does show him working on coaching young players and playing himself in a celebrity power league called Stars League. Although Nile is not getting any younger and it's clear he is now playing at his highest level. He admits it's difficult training by himself as he struggles with self-motivation, but he is working on an autobiography and plans to release a movie about his crazy life. Nile seems genuinely remorseful, and even at 32, it's not too late to turn his life around, which I hope he does. It's a great thing his life hasn't turned out like Paul Gascoigne's, who you can learn about by clicking the video on your screen.